Meeting to order tonight. Welcome to our board meeting. We appreciate your attendance and glad that you've made it with us. We will begin our meeting tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance, and it will be recited by board member Doug Hurst, please.
Audience, please rise. Join with me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Doug. Board, you've had the opportunity to review the items on the consent calendar. I would entertain a motion to approve them.
so moved.
Doug, a second. Bruce, any comments or questions on that consent calendar? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Let's move into our public comment portion of our meeting tonight. We have one person signed up. As a reminder, speakers will be given up to 3 minutes to address the board. We ask that the patron state their name, the school that their children attend, and the city of their residence. And also, let me read this quick. The board will not take public comment on personnel issues or statements regarding the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual during our board meetings. Individuals should refrain from making rude or slanderous remarks that may violate the rights of others under the laws of defamation or invasion of privacy. Speech that defames individuals or interrupts the public business of the board will not be tolerated and may be cause for removal from the meeting. So, Danielle Halley, please.
Good evening. My name is Danielle Hawley. I'm from Pleasant View. I have 2 students at Lillman View, but I'm here talking as a very concerned taxpayer. For over a year, this board has told parents, teachers, and taxpayers that Weber School District faces significant budget constraints. We have heard about declining enrollment. We have heard discussions about closing top-performing schools. We have watched cherished teachers and staff lose their jobs. And we have watched educators go without the raises they deserve. Yet, when taxpayers look at the district's financial decisions, the message does not match the actions. According to the Utah State Auditor's transparency website, transparent.utah.gov, which I urge all taxpayers to go to, 8 district employees receive more in total compensation than the governor of Utah. 3 district employees earn more than the governor in salary alone. Year after year, taxpayers continue to see substantial amounts, of our school district's expenses go to our district administration. In fact, in its 2025 financials, the school district addressed a decline in enrollment, but showed an increase of over $1 million in district administration costs from last year. Weber School District is roughly half of Davis School District, yet comparing audited financials using the required chart of accounts that allows for such comparisons, Weber spends $3 million more on district administration than Davis. These costs are specifically for Board of Education Services and the Office of the Superintendent. They are not teacher salaries, they are not classroom expenses, they are not direct services to students. $3 million more on district administration than Davis School District. And then there are community reinvestment activities. Last November, taxpayers raised concerns that the district had foregone almost $20 million in tax revenue over the previous 6 years through CRA agreements, with another $5 million projected next year and each year after, with some not expiring until the year 2060. To be clear, other taxing entities are voting not to participate in CRA tax reductions, yet our school district is. Despite those concerns, this board unanimously approved another CRA agreement just 2 months ago. Think about that for a moment. The district claims there is not enough money for teachers, not enough money to avoid layoffs, not enough money to keep schools open, not enough money for meaningful teacher raises. But apparently there is enough money to maintain administrative spending levels that exceed comparable districts and enough flexibility to continue approving agreements that reduce future school tax revenue. So which is it? Are we truly facing a budget crisis, or are we facing a priority crisis? Because from the perspective of many taxpayers, the district's actions suggest that administrative spending and development incentives continue to receive greater protection than students, neighborhood schools, and teachers. Public trust is earned when words and records the actions align. Right now, many taxpayers are struggling to see that alignment. Our children deserve better, our teachers deserve better, and the taxpayers funding this district deserve better answers. Again, I urge all taxpayers to visit transparent.utah.gov themselves to see where our taxpayer money is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Pam, no one else? All right, thank you. That's the only public comment we had tonight. So let's move on with some discussion items. Lane Findley, please.
Superintendent, President, Board, appreciate the opportunity to talk just a little bit about our contract negotiations with our law enforcement partners. And I wanted to give you an update on where we're at in that process. We do have a tentative agreement with our 6 partners, and we're going to be moving forward with that, finalizing that agreement over the next month or so. And so my plan is to be back here in August with a formal presentation for you to vote on and approve. So just a quick update. We started this process back in about the end of January, and it's been very challenging. And part of it has been we value our SROs. We want officers in our schools. They're great partners in our community, and so when there are financial challenges and you have to look at where money's going to be spent, obviously you have to prioritize that. And we've always said we want to keep SROs no matter what. And one of the challenges in the agreement is we have been asked to fund 100% of the cost of salary and benefits for each officer for those 9 months while they're assigned to the school. That's a little bit outside the norm of what most districts do around the state. There's usually more of an equal split. And so that led to, like I said, some very challenging negotiations and being able to reach an agreement. We were able to, a few weeks ago, finally kind of break through and get to a point where we feel there's a pathway moving forward. And in your board book, in your packet, is a memo that outlines some of those tentative agreements as far as the contract. And so just in a nutshell, we're going to be working on a 5-year contract, and it will be a phased-in amount each year of 5%. We're currently paying 70-30 split, so the district's paying 70% of the cost for officers. We will be moving to that 100% mark over that 5-year period, so 5% each year. And so that was one of the conditions that, like I said, was very challenging to work through. The other part of it that was part of the negotiations is we have a half-time SRO at Snowcrest Junior High School. And a half-time SRO is just, it's difficult to kind of work, what is their schedule? How many hours do they spend in the school? How much time can they devote to Valley Elementary if they're only there half of a day? And so as part of the agreement, we are going to look at moving that to a full-time position. So we would have 16 full-time SROs in all of our secondary schools throughout the district under this new negotiated interlocal agreement. One of the other big changes as part of this agreement is in the past we've always used the average cost of all of the agencies. So of the 6 agencies, we would take the average cost for an officer. Under this new agreement, we're actually going to contract individually based on each entity's cost per officer. And so that's one of the bigger changes with this agreement from those in the past. And again, I'm not looking for a vote of approval today. Like I said, we still have some work to do, reaching out to the individual entities, working with the cities. we find that when those contracts go to the county and to the city, oftentimes there's some feedback and some other discussions that still have to take place. And so I'm really looking for kind of a vote of confidence to move forward with finalizing the contract with all of our partners, and then I can come back in August and formally present that. So yeah, any questions?
I don't have any questions because I think we've had a lot of discussion. I just wanted to say thank you for your team and for all of your hard work. I know this has not been an easy last like 3, 4, 5 months working on this. So one, I want to thank you. And also I think just so people know, like our commitment here is one, to have these school resource officers and to be in compliance with the law, but also working really hard to fit within our budget for our SROs. So I just want to shout out your team for being, what's the word? I don't know, just holding out for that. Because I think that your hard work put us in this scenario where now we're actually saving money and we're going to get that full-time officer at Snowcrest. Which question, when we had a 0.5 there, was that technically in compliance with our?
It wouldn't be, because under HB 84 and the new law, you have to have an armed personnel on campus, an armed person on campus while school's in session. So that's basically bell to bell. So if you're only half-time, half of the school day is uncovered, and so technically we'd be in non-compliance if we didn't have other backup options.
And then the grace period for absences with that 5 days a year, that's just for next year, and then it'll go to 1 day?
Yeah, that was part of the negotiations in the past, because it was more of a 50-50 split. The expectation now is if we're going to be paying more money for SROs, they need to be in the schools. We need to get the service that we're paying for. And so we were asked if we could do a phased-in grace period to allow for, because one of the challenges for our law enforcement is training, vacation, sick leave, emergencies that happen in the community where the officer's not going to be at the school. And so there's always been a lot of flexibility in the past. We feel with the financial commitment that we're making that there's a greater commitment from law enforcement to backfill that position. And so we're going to phase into that with the adjustment in the formula on cost as well. Yeah, Bruce.
Lane, thanks. I just wanted to reiterate how much work you have done to make this possible. With all the entities that you're working with, it's not an easy accomplishment. And so appreciate all the work that's been done. I think this phase in will give us some time to react and be able to see what the other options may be.
Great, I appreciate that. It's really been a team effort from those in the district, and we also have some wonderful partners in law enforcement. In fact, Lieutenant Slater from the Sheriff's Office, he's our county security chief. He's over all of the schools in Weber County, and he works directly with the state as the liaison between the county and the school district and all the charters. And he's been instrumental in this process behind the scenes, kind of helping us work through some of the issues. He has a great perspective on the schools, and so I just appreciate him as well, and like I said, our partnership with all of our law enforcement agencies.
I think it's been so critical to have the relationships that happen between, even down to our students, that they have a relationship with a law enforcement officer that is positive. So that to me speaks to why it's so important for us to maintain that relationship, I guess, with our law enforcement people. It's not just for the purpose of security, it's for the purpose of relationships too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bigger picture in it for sure.
Board, could I just add one thing? I know this is your meeting. I just want to give a shout out to Sheriff Arbonne and all of the police chiefs. They've engaged with us. At the end of the day, everybody in the room over a period of several months has one goal, and that is to keep our kids safe. And we've always wanted to make sure that we had SROs at our schools. So I think the best possible scenarios played out, and I'm very grateful for that.
So if there are no objections, we'll continue this process, and I'll come back in August with the formal agreement.
Thank
Great.
you.
Great, thank
Thanks,
you.
and let the communities, law enforcement, and the sheriff know how much we appreciate everything they do. And thanks to you and being clear up to here all summer long with that project.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. We'll next hear from our HR directors and our business administrator, going over the employee agreements, proposed COLA, and the benefits package.
Okay. President Widdowson, Superintendent Butters, and Board, we appreciate the opportunity that we have tonight to share the proposed information that is come out of negotiations this year. I do want to start by thanking our employee groups. There is a lot of time, dedication, thought, and discussion that goes into this negotiation process. And we've been negotiating for over the past several months with our groups. We appreciate the professional relationship that we have with our employee groups, as well as their support as we go throughout this negotiation process. I just want to start by recognizing the number of employees that we have here in Weber School District. We are one of the largest employers in northern Utah. We have two charts up here. The chart on the left reflects the number of education support professionals which we have, which are individuals that work for the district that their positions do not require a license. The chart on the right is our certified employees. So the certified employees are your educators and those employees who work in positions where their positions require licensing. Education support professional employees, we have approximately 3,500 employees. And then with our certified employees, we have approximately about 2,000 employees, totaling number about approximately 5,500 employees that work for Weber School District. Out of the 5,500 employees, we have approximately 2,700 employees that are benefits eligible. What benefits eligible means is these are employees who receive the retirement benefit, district leave benefits, and other district paid benefits. Out of the 2,700 benefits eligible employees, we have 1,900 employees who are enrolled and subscribed to our insurance plan. When you take the 1,900 employees and they enroll their dependents and their family members, we have approximately 5,400 individuals that are on our medical insurance plan with Select Health. So I'd like to start tonight just providing some information regarding our insurance and the proposals for this year. With our medical insurance, we have an insurance committee that includes representatives from our different employee groups. With the insurance committee, we meet at least quarterly, if not more frequently. With the insurance committee, we work very closely with our insurance broker. And when we meet quarterly, we review our utilization reports for all of our insurances, our medical, our dental, and our vision. So we can see throughout the year how our utilization is running. I want to share with you tonight the last report that we received, which is a summary, a look back at our utilization over the past year. You'll see our medical claims total cost was $12.82 million. And the bottom on the number on the bottom shows the increase of what we experienced this year versus last year. So we're comparing data from September 2025 to February 2026 compared to September 2024 through February 2025. So we had an increase in medical claims cost of $1.62 million this past year. When we look at our pharmaceutical cost, the total cost was $4.92 million, which was an increase of about $656,000 over the past year. So the total number of claims is our medical claims and our pharmaceutical claims added together, which was $17.74 million, an increase of $2.27 million this past year that we experienced. So with that data and that increase in cost, what that means is it puts the district in a position where we are at a loss ratio of 101%. So what does a loss ratio mean? For every dollar spent in premiums that the district has paid to Select Health was paying closer to $1.20. which triggers a premium increase. When we review the data as the insurance committee, the data is broken out. One thing that we look at is our large claimant cost. A large claim is considered a claim that has reached $25,000 for one claim. This last year, our large claimant costs were up $5.64 million, which is at a 28% increase over last year. Then we also look at our pharmaceutical claims. This past 12 months, we have experienced a pharmaceutical claim of $1.34 million, which is a 15% increase over last year. In reviewing our claims and what conditions are being treated on our insurance, the most expensive conditions that are treated are diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis. So with that information, looking at the utilization and the loss ratio of 101%, Select Health provides us every year with an insurance renewal rate. When we very first received the renewal rate from Select Health, it came in at a 16.3%. So as a district, we propose that we go out for bid and let's work and see what other providers can bid us for an insurance rate. There was 4 providers that responded with a quote, and keep in mind that they received the information on the district's utilization and our claims. And so based on that information, that's where they provide a quote. So based on that information, EMI Health came in with a quote of 13.49% to 13.99%. The reason that there's 2 different numbers there is because they quoted 2 different plan options. The U of U Health come in at 17.72%. PEHP also provided 2 different quotes. One that offered a limited network of the Intermountain Healthcare that was at 11.13%. And the second quote was included the Intermountain Network and the Summit Network at 12.41%. We also went back to Select Health and asked them, okay, we're going out for bid. What can you do? We need to negotiate this down. And they come back with an 11.7% renewal rate. There was 4 providers that responded with a no quote for Weber School District. Based on the information of our utilization and our cost, they said that they could not be competitive with what Select Health was offering us. Those providers included Aetna, Cigna, Regence, and United Healthcare. We also looked at adding a second carrier, meaning another network, to offer options to our employees. If the district would have added another carrier, it would have increased those quotes substantially. Anytime you bring on a second carrier, the carriers are bidding against each other. And so that would have increased our 9.23% rate, which we were able to negotiate down. As the district and the committee looks at these quotes, there's things that they keep in mind as they're reviewing this information. What is going to be best for the district? You look at anytime you move medical carriers, it causes disruption to the employees because not all plans are structured the same. Not all treating physicians are on the same plans. Not all prescriptions are covered the same within different insurance carriers and the tiers. So as the district continued to work with Select Health, it was proposed that we stay with Select Health. We looked at what can we do to negotiate that 11.7% down. We were able to get it down to a 9.23%, making some decrement changes within our plan. When we look at decrement changes within the plan, your plan is made up of a deductible, coinsurance, an out-of-pocket max, and also the coverage for services. So we work with our insurance broker to look at data. What decrements are going to least impact our employees based on the utilization? Our deductible is staying the same at the $3,500 and $7,500. Some plan structure changes that will be made for this next year is the coinsurance. Your coinsurance is the amount that members pay after they meet their deductible. Currently, our coinsurance was at 100%. During this process, we also look at other districts and the structure of other district plans. One thing that we found is that there was not one other district insurance plan that covered their coinsurance at 100%. The average was that they covered at 80%. So we went with a proposed change to decrease from that 100% to a 90%. So the proposed changes for the new upcoming plan year will shift 10% of the responsibility to the member once the deductible is met until they meet the out-of-pocket max. The data for making the change in this benefit showed that it would impact approximately 12% of the members that are currently on our insurance plan. The other decrement change that is being proposed is the out-of-pocket maximum. Currently, we're at $3,500 and $7,500, and the proposed change is to move it to $4,500 and $9,000. Keep in mind that the out-of-pocket maximum only affects those high utilizers of the plan who make up relatively a small percentage of memberships on this plan. So in reviewing the plan utilization, it was determined that approximately 85% of members will not be impacted by these plan design changes, so that we're able to negotiate that renewal rate down to a 9.23%. This next slide just reviews the insurance premiums, the proposed premiums for next year. I want to draw attention to the last two columns. When you look at the total employee participation and the total district participation. For this next year, the total employee participation will be 21.7% of the premium, with the district participation at 78.3%. So what that means is that the district is going to pick up the majority of that 9.23% insurance increase for next year. Moving on to dental insurance. Dental insurance is a voluntary employee paid benefit. 2 years ago, we were with Dental Select and Emeritus as our provider, and we were receiving a lot of negative feedback from our employees that had concerns with the service that they were receiving. They also were experiencing that their dentists were frequently dropping from the network. So based on that employee feedback, 2 years ago, we went out for bid and we transitioned to a new dental provider, which is Delta Dental. Also at this time, employees expressed interest in enhancing our dental plan. They were requesting that we add dental implants as a benefit, as well as looking at and seeing if we could increase the orthodontic coverage. So taking that information and working with our new provider, Delta Dental, at that time, 3 different insurance plans options were created. The 3 options are for employees because they can enroll in which benefit plan is going to meet their employee and family needs. The premiums for dental insurance has remained the same the past 2 years. Unfortunately, our dental plan, we are in a similar situation as with our medical plan, where our claims have outpaced the premiums. And so dental insurance, we are self-funded. We've experienced that the past 2 years, the plan has paid out 30% more than what it has collected in premiums. So it is proposed that this next year that we do increase the dental premiums by 30.5% so that we are able to balance out those funds for the coming year.
Lori, do you want to speak to the board about the few times that when we don't outpace that you've been able to give employees premium vacations?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kelly. We, as a self-funded plan, we hold the reserves. And so the past couple of years, because we had, I should say before, the previous years, because we had a large reserve balance, we will do what's called a holiday premium. And so meaning that the employees will not have to pay a premium. We've historically done it the month of December, so they would not have to pay a dental insurance premium during that month. So moving forward with that proposed increase of the 30.5%, the district does continue to monitor that reserve balance. And if we are able to get that balance back up to a healthy reserve, we will definitely take into consideration of doing those holiday premiums again in the future. So. Moving on to vision insurance. With the vision insurance, we offer two different plans. We are in a rate guarantee until August 31st, 2028, so there will be no premium changes for the vision plan this year. And we received some exciting news from our vision plan because the district, looking at how the plan has been performing the past 2 years and it is performing favorably, they are going to enhance some of our benefits for the plan. So you'll see here in the chart below that anything with your frame allowances and your lens allowances, the benefit starting September 1st of this year will be increased. Want to note that the district is continuing with some other district paid benefits. Our health savings account. This is applicable to any employee who is enrolled in the medical insurance plan. The district will continue to make a yearly contribution based on the plan type which they are enrolled, and those amounts are there on the bottom. And then for education support professionals, the district, those who are enrolled in the medical plan, the district will continue to contribute to a health reimbursement account yearly, and that contribution happens in November, and those amounts are identified there. They will continue. And then for those employees who are in the Utah retirement system, the Tier 2, the hybrid plan, the district will also continue to contribute 0.8% of their gross salary into a 401k monthly to the Utah retirement system.
Hey, Lori, sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting your presentation, but I am the board member who sits on the insurance committee, so this is my 4th year on the insurance committee, and it was really overwhelming for me at first because this was all new, but I think it wasn't this year, but last year, our benefits consultant company brought to our committee kind of an Excel spreadsheet of what other districts offer in terms of their employee insurance benefits with the districts redacted, but honestly, for me, it was eye-opening how much, even with these decrement changes and even with our employee contribution changes and the co-insurance changes, how much better our insurance package is than our surrounding districts. It shocked me. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that even with these changes, and it seems like a lot, I know, like I said, our utilization's high. I know that the dental insurance, some of that was affected by the orthodontia and the implant coverage. So that's one reason why our utilization went up. But I just wanted to point that out, that our health insurance benefits are far and away better than our neighboring districts.
Thanks, Kelly. We appreciate the work of the insurance committee that they do on that as well, because we do continuously compare other districts, because it's important to us to make sure that our insurance plan stays competitive. So when you look at all of the district paid benefits that the district offers and you add it to an employee's salary, it adds a value of about 37.85% to an employee's salary. So I have an example here, the chart on the right. This is an educator who is on lane 1, step 7. Their annual salary is $67,231. And then you will see here the district paid benefits, the retirement, the medical insurance, the long-term disability, the short-term disability, and the life insurance that is a benefit provided to the employee, how it increases and adds to that total compensation package and increases it to $108,000. The chart on the right includes the total annual cost for Social Security. And these figures do not include the total compensation that is offered when an employee retires by those district retirement benefits. Is there any other questions on benefits before we transition?
Superintendent Butters, President Widdowson, and Board. This next section is to continue talking about our negotiations process and the need for a new salary schedule. And so I just want to talk a little bit about why another salary schedule. So the Utah State Code 53F2405 is about the ESA funds, which is the Educator Salary Adjustment funding. And that is for what the legislature came to attract and retain highly skilled educators. And that law actually defines, or that Utah State Code defines, what positions qualify to receive those funds. So Weber School District has had one salary schedule, an educator salary schedule, so that's just for all certified employees that they had in place prior to all of the ESA funds continuing to increase over the years. So you can see there on the right, it shows the years that it started in 2008, and then another large amount in 2009, so that was the $4,200 that was built into our base salary schedule. And I'll get a little bit more into detail on those specific salary schedules in just a moment. But what we wanted to point out here is the reason there was a need to create another salary schedule is because everyone was on the one salary schedule, whether they qualified for those ESA funds or not. And so that was why we moved to create a salary schedule that reflected that those employees were, that we wanted to make sure it was competitive to what they were currently making, but knowing that they could not continue to receive the additional ESA funds as those were allocated by the legislature. And so this last year, it was an increase of $311. So there's a total amount of $10,661 that has been allocated by the legislature so far since the ESA began. So our base salary schedule, this one is what we created a few years ago because the ESA funds were increasing. And this salary schedule includes that $4,200 that was originally embedded in that salary schedule. So this base salary schedule currently will serve as how we calculate the COLA and any stipends, because there are positions that receive additional stipends to that job description. And so any of those stipend amounts will be calculated off the base salary schedule. And this salary schedule will never receive another increase in the ESA fund. So this one will stay as is. It will only receive the COLA as that progresses over time. So that is the purpose of the base salary schedule. So then we have it's been in existence for a few years. We have the certified educator salary schedule, and this one includes all of the ESA funds. So this one includes that additional that I talked about on this, let's go back. On this screen, the 6461. So that amount is reflected here on this certified educator salary schedule. We also had to look at what positions actually qualify to receive those ESA funds. And that is something that is defined here on the salary schedule. When we post these live for employees to see once we've reached to be approved, these positions, there's a link that you can go and see what positions would qualify for the educator salary adjustment. And so those are listed there as well. And you can see a lot of those positions include some of our medical professionals, and they also have to have a USBE license. And so there's specific criteria that we have to work with at the USBE as we define those in our reporting through Cactus that will be moving to USIMS, will be the new system. But there's certain ways that they have to be coded in order for those positions to generate that funding. So those are the positions that currently are being reflected in Weber School District that will receive the ESA. So the new salary schedule is the one called the Licensed Employee Salary Schedule. And we wanted to remain competitive because, as you can see, the positions that qualify on there are a lot of our medical professionals. And those positions, we know that need to be competitive with what they could make in the medical field. And so we did not change the salary schedule. So this current salary schedule, we did not take the ESA funds off of that were previously put on that salary schedule. This salary schedule will just not receive the increase of those ESA funds over time as those continue to increase. So that was why we created that new salary schedule.
So, Nicole,
uh-huh.
so what you're saying is on the ones for the people not receiving the ESA stipends,
Mhm.
that up until this current year, we've been giving these employee groups the ESA stipend out of district funding because it wasn't being given extra from the state.
That's
Right,
correct. We
okay.
had the one salary schedule and everyone was on that. And yes, whether they were generating those ESA funds or not, they were receiving them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so just some professional agreements language changes. One thing we would like to point out through our negotiations and as we have worked through the displacement of teachers and our ESPs is that our district is unique where not all districts have displacement process in their professional agreement. And so that's one area that Weber School District really prioritizes our employees in terms of a displacement process versus just going to a RIF. A lot of other districts just RIF employees and don't have a way to displace them or place them in positions to retain them. And so we worked through the displacement of our full-time ESPs and teachers. All full-time displaced teachers and ESPs have now been placed. That has taken time because the only way we can do that is we have to watch over time as other employees, just through attrition, as they separate from the district. So other employees that decide they're going to retire, they're moving, finding other employment. And so it is a waiting game and sometimes can be stressful. But I do want to thank Matt Williams and Heather Nelson and Juliana Woodbury for the time and effort that they took. It was very it was a lot of stress for a lot of people, and we didn't see quite the turnover this year with employees leaving the district. Our data shows that we were close to about the same attrition, but not quite. And so it did take a little time, but we are proud to say that all of our full-time ESPs and teachers were placed in positions.
Well, I just wanted to clarify. I know there's been a lot of miscommunication out in the public that those teachers who were displaced in the spring were either fired or looking for positions. So we just for clarity, we're speaking specifically about all of our teachers, mostly elementary teachers that were displaced in March, who chose to come back to the district, have found new positions, just not at the school that they were originally teaching at.
Kelly, that displacement applies to full-time equivalent teachers, yes?
Yeah, that's right, yes. And that was that's why we put this up here, is that was one change we made in the agreement to make sure that it defined that it was for full-time. That's where that affects. One of the other benefits that we were able to negotiate for our employees, because again, I feel like Weber School District really does prioritize employees, and so it was proposed that we exchange a sick day to add a PTO day, and for both the WEA and the WESP groups, just to help create more flexibility for employees as they work through their work-life balance. And so that was something else that we were able to do through negotiations. And then we included, so sometimes during negotiations process, we need to have more time and have a committee to work through different topics that come up or that want to be negotiated between the two groups. Between the district and the WEA, we did come up with a memorandum to discuss staffing process for educators. So we will be forming a committee, and that will be done by September 30th to establish our committee. And the core purpose of establishing this joint committee is to build a more transparent, predictable, and equitable framework for just district staffing. We want to proactively collaborate with the association and the district, aim to replace ambiguity with absolute clarity, ensuring that the contract language serves the best interests of educators, schools, and the district. So we want to engage in a process to take a look at our current staffing processes and our agreements to ensure that we are doing it the most fair and equitable way for everyone involved. And so we will be working through that MOU as the year moves on, starting this fall. So. Any questions on that before Brock?
No, I just wanted to, on the MOU number 4,
Mhm.
I know that this kind of came out of our displacement and part-time teacher reductions.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to bring that out, that's something that's going to start sooner than later. And don't you have an end date on that as well before negotiations next year?
Yeah, our goal is we did not want to have another year of without being able to go through staffing without looking at those changes. So yes, our goal is to have this completed by the end of December so that we can come in the January board meeting to give you our proposal of what any changes are going to be made so that can affect our staffing process if there are any changes starting in the spring of next school year. Thank you. You're welcome.
May I just say, I'm so grateful about your establishment of the joint committee that will review staffing, because having dealt with local displaced educators, I think that a transparent, predictable, and equitable framework will be so welcome.
Mm-hmm.
It was very upsetting, very confusing,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm excited that you're going forward to this. And this is just a minimal footnote, and maybe everybody else's packet has it, but I don't have the vision insurance coverage. Did anyone else? No.
Yeah, that was added.
We'll get you a copy of that one. Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for your hard work. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment? I appreciate all the work all of you do with health insurance and staffing and so forth. I spent 30 years with the company. I was on the health insurance committee, and that's a tough situation. The medical profession blames the attorneys blame the insurance companies blame the attorneys, and the medical people have to perform procedures that may not be necessary to keep from being sued. Their malpractice insurance costs are going up, and it's a tough situation. So I appreciate all you're doing. Do the best for all concerned. Thank you so much. It's a tough time.
Thank you.
All right, board, I was asked to talk a little bit about the compensation package and how that was put together. These exact same slides were presented to all of the groups, but I want to walk you through how the numbers came to be. So each spring, I get what's called a legislative estimate. And what it does is it lays out the funds for the upcoming school year. And it uses a couple different numbers, and I'll actually get into these numbers a little more detailed in the budget presentation soon. But on this slide, I've got kind of a what if and an actual. So let me jump down to that second line first, that enrollment fiscal year 26 actual. So at the end of the year, the prior year, we had 31,096.858 students enrolled in our district. And the way this works is if a student's enrolled part of the year and then they separate at any point in the year, it's 180th per day they're in there. So there's fractionality that goes into this enrollment. It's called the average daily membership. Okay, so it's the number of days they're actually enrolled. As a district, we get one WPU value for each of those ADMs. So if you take that 31,096 times last year's WPU value of 4674, that gives you the $145 million from the state. And we generated that last year. Now, I jump up to the what if. The what if is, what if we kept that same 31,096 students this upcoming year at our new WPU value of 4870? What that would generate is $151 million for the school district. You'll see that difference there is $6 million. The problem is we've had a loss of enrollment, right? And so that's something we've talked about over the last year. And the numbers that are presented, again, are estimates, right? This is a legislative estimate. It comes out in March. Our final ADM isn't finished until the second week in July. So that 777 is an estimate. Now, if you take that loss of enrollment at $4,870 per student, that's a loss of $3.786 million for our district. And so what remains of those two is that $2.3 million. Okay, so what we got last year, the 145, what we would have gotten minus the students is that 2.3 million. Okay, the slides I have here are the exact same numbers, but just laid out in what I actually got on the estimates. Okay, so that second line again is true. Those numbers are solid. We've already received those funds. The fiscal year 27 is what we anticipate receiving. That difference in that K-12 ADM is that 777 students. And so you'll see the difference there again is that $2.3 million. So those are new funds coming in for K-12. When they talk that 4.2% ADM increase, that 4.2% WPU increase, that's what that generates. Okay. What also happens on that legislative estimates, and this is on the USBE financial website. Anybody can go pull every district's charts, but you have all of these different categories where traditionally we've used all of these funds for teacher salaries. Okay, so K-12 I just went through. NES is necessarily existing small schools. We get some funding for Snowcrest. And so that amount there, you can see the difference is $23,000 more this upcoming year. Foreign exchange, it's a proportionality of how many foreign exchange students we have in our district, so we get a little bit of an increase there. Class size reduction, you can see a small increase there. Teacher salary support, that's what used to be professional staffing. 2 legislative sessions ago, it was moved to flexible allocation. This last legislative session, they changed that title to teacher classroom salary support, and so you can see that we got $128,000 there. And then there's that bottom line is TSSA. We, by legislative rule, we can take 25% of any TSSA monies that are sent to us and use that for salaries. Every year we've done that. We take 25% of what's allocated to us and use that for salaries. You'll see in the 26 to 27 that decreased. The reason is 2 legislative sessions ago they capped that. So there is no more growth to that TSSA. So since we had already allocated a certain number to salaries, we unfortunately have to pull some of that back because that money is no longer there. Right? So that is a hole that we have to backfill. And so that's why you'll see that 61,000 is taken off. So taking all of those new revenues, it leaves us with new revenue accounts of just over $2.5 million. That's what comes from that 4.2% WPU increase. Okay? The second part of this is, again, looking at health insurance. Now, Lori went through this, but let me go a little bit deeper as to how this is calculated. Each year we get an idea. Oh, that works perfect. We get an idea of how many subscribers we have at the end of the year. So if you take the number of subscribers times the rate, that gives you a total monthly amount that it costs the district overall for health insurance. Now, a portion of that is covered by employees. We know that. You take that times 12, you get the total annual. The employee share, the remaining share is the WSD share. And now let me explain this K-12 amount. In our legislative allocations, we have certain programs where money is allocated to us. Think special education, CTE. Those come with the benefits added. And so there's a portion of the benefits that the state helps cover for our employees, right? Their salaries and their benefits. The difference between the WSD share and that K-12 amount is what the state legislature covers. So of that $29.9 million last year, they covered a little over $7.8 million. And the remaining amount is everybody else who comes out of K-12. And when we talk K-12, that is kindergarten through every employee that we have in our district. Okay, so that is last year. If you look now at the proposed over on the left, we see up here we have this 9.23% increase. They use the same subscribers because that is a snapshot in time. They have to give us an estimation based on the snapshot in time. Okay, so these numbers are, again, truly just estimates. We're pretty early in that. But again, following that same process, multiply by the rates, you get your monthly amount, your annual amount, the employee share. Laurie talked about a small increase there. It then shows you what the WSD share is, the K-12 allocation. All of that's the same. What I want to point out is this $23.4 million and that $22.1 million. The difference there is this K-12 increase. Okay, so that's the key number. So each year when we factor what new expense is coming to Weber School District that we have to pick up through our K-12, that's where that comes from. Okay, so when we say as a district we're picking up the new insurance costs, that's the $1.28 million. Okay. Now, again, the overall health insurance increase was the $3.4 million. Our total increase is there. Now, the one conversation that went back and forth through these decisions in how do we provide compensation surrounded that percentage increase from the 19.16 to the 21.7. The reason being, if we put all of that $2.5 million towards health insurance, it eliminates the possibilities of COLA. And COLA benefits every employee in the district, where health insurance, is impacting part of the employees, those that choose to take it. The big kind of driver in this is COLA impacts our retirement for our employees. So when we give these COLAs and these salary increases, it works towards their retirement. It benefits them in the long run, where funding insurance doesn't. And so that's why some of these decisions are made when it leads to these increases in rates. So again, I want to call out two numbers here. Let me go back to 2.5 million. The 1.2 million on this slide leads me to here. Up at the top, this is our new revenues, as you saw. Right here, we have our health insurance costs. So part of what happens is we have to decide overall, what is the K-12 employee expense cost, salaries and benefits. Okay? So what we do is we have to project out. We try and take a projection, and that projected salary for this year is $192.5 million. So if you think of every 1% increase, you just divide that by 100, and a 1% increase in anything is $1.9 million. Okay? And so as you look at what's remaining, you take that $2.5 million, take off the insurance costs, that leaves $1.24 million for any compensation. You start thinking that 1%, where does that land? And that lands with a 0.65% COLA. And so that 0.65 is that number right there. Okay? So if you take our revenues, subtract our expenses, that's our total. You can see we still overspend, but again, I want to emphasize these are estimates. Right? We don't know exactly where we're going to land. As I get into the budget, I'm going to refer back to the 777 at one point, so just kind of be aware of that. Now, I know one piece of feedback that you guys have heard is talks about the steps. The steps to move our employees along cost $3.1 million. And so you can see here, that wasn't even part of that 4.2% overall, because the 4.2% was $2.5 million. And so that's part of why, when I get into the budget conversation, you're going to see some of the steps and the proposals that I'm going to put in place to help us going forward. What I want to also talk about is how the COLA and the ESA are factored into this. So Nicole walked through the salary schedules. Again, I'm going to use this Lane 1, Step 7, just kind of a random step there. So the salary on that Lane 1, Step 7 is $67,231. If we back out the state's portion of that $10,350, that leaves that $56,881 that Weaver School District picks up. That's that salary. We then take that $10,350 times the 3%. Now that is now set in legislation. It used to be that the ESA grew the same exact as the WPU, which would have been 4.2%. Legislation capped that. That is now capped at 3%. So there will be a 3% growth on ESA each year. It won't follow WPU. Okay, so this is going to be standard. But that's where that $10,661 came in. The Weaver School District portion, that $56,881, multiply that by the 0.65% is $57,251. Adding those together, that's where we get our new Lane 1, Step 7 for this upcoming year. That's done on every step, every lane. For this particular step and lane, when you add in the state's portion, ends up overall as a 1.01% COLA. If you go through our entire salary schedule, every step and lane is a little bit different. And what ends up happening is it ranges as a total, including the state portion, as a 0.9% up to a 1.06%. Again, depending on the steps and the lanes that they're in. So this is the educator salary schedule. Every other group does not get that ESA component, and so every other group will remain on that 0.65% COLA. Okay? One piece that's important, the legislation did fund paid professional hours, and so any employee that got it previously, whether they are now put on a different salary schedule or not, they're still going to be eligible for that paid professional hours. That's at their daily rate, and it's we've got to calculate that based on an allocation, but it was somewhere between 28 and 30 hours in the past. We anticipate it being very similar. Okay. Just wanted to point this out. I started doing a little bit of comparisons between our district and other districts, and I didn't identify the districts. Anyone can go out there and find these districts if they wanted to. But these are districts that are like size or larger. I didn't choose any districts that are smaller than us, and they're from our area all the way to southern Utah. So what I want to do is look and see what does their step and lane structure look like. And these top 4 here have what's called a single lane district. And so Nicole pulled ours up, and you can see that we had 5 different lanes, multiple steps that go through this. These first 4 districts have single lanes. So when you have a first-year teacher, you come in on essentially step 1, and each year you just move incrementally down that single lane. When you get an advanced degree, you just move multiple steps. It's no lanes across, okay? And so for this first district, it was $875 per step. So year 1 to year 2, it's $875. Year 20 to year 21, it's $875 all the way across. If they got 20 semester hours, it was 2 additional steps. If they got a master's or a doctorate, it was 5 steps. Now, it's not 5 steps from where they were. It's 5 steps from where they would have been when they had their bachelor's. So what I mean by that is if they're on step 3, then they get those 20 hours and jump to step 5. If they get their master's, they don't jump from 5 to 10. They go from 5 to 7, or to 8, because they were on 3. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. The same idea with these other 4 districts. So you can see 875, 900, 950, 1,000. All those steps are set, and they are locked in at those amounts. Okay. What I want to point out on ours, for our first 13 steps, we have an average of those different amounts. Okay, so each step that you take on average is $1,882 as a bachelor. So every year, our employees are getting that much more per year. Now, if you were to go back and pull up Nicole's scale again, once a bachelor employee hits year 4, they surpass all of those districts above. Right at step 4, they hit that $1,000 plus every year. And so you can see, just because of the smaller numbers, that drives that bachelor average down. But a bachelor's plus 36 or a master's on step 1 are already above those other districts. So I wanted to point that out because I think it's important to look district to district what's happening. I think when they hear steps are given, they're not apples to apples. They are very different in what that means. The other piece to this is I've got our lane changes. If we were to go to a single lane, it would totally change the dynamic of what we do here. We want our employees getting advanced degrees, because you'll see there, that bottom right one, a lane change is $8,000 to go from a bachelor's to a master's. That's a pretty substantial increase. And if you look at the ones above, they don't come close to those. And so I think it's important, again, that we recognize our salary schedule compared to others, districts that are larger than us. And then I found one that was very similar to us. And so this is another district, again, not going to name them, but you can see that they're pretty close. It looks pretty much the exact same. The one thing I want to point out is you'll notice they're 1 to 12. They're all the exact same amount. I'm not sure where our salary schedule got started and why the numbers are all over the place. I could not find that, but theirs is pretty standard there. The big difference they have, we do have some frozen steps along the way, right? So once you hit, I want to say it's step 13, 14 is frozen, you get another bump at 15, and then I think 16 is frozen, and then you get another bump at 17. For this district, they are frozen from 15 to 27. So that's pretty substantial. So again, just wanted to point out some of the differences across the state and districts. It's all over the place when it comes to these salary scales. But I think the fact that we have multiple steps and multiple lanes actually is an advantage for our district, because this right here, I think, tells a very compelling story. And I know our HR department uses this when they are recruiting new teachers. Okay, I think that's everything from HR's component. So I'll turn it back over to these two.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to all of that. We know that's a lot of information, but at this time we would like to recommend that the board approves our professional agreements and compensation package.
Thank you, Nicole and Laurie, Brock. Thank you for giving us a lot of good information that I can understand, so that means it was well presented. Thank you. Board, it's been recommended to us that we approve the 2026-2027 employee agreements. and proposed COLA and benefits package. I need a motion to approve that. Kelly, a second. Wiley, any comments?
I just wanted to point out, Nicole, could you just explain what would happen if the board did not approve the compensation package?
Yes. If they did not approve, then we would go to what we call an impasse, which means we couldn't settle on an agreement because the other associations have ratified, which means they agree to what is being proposed. So if the district chooses not to approve, then we go to an impasse, and there is no COLA increase, and everything stays status quo until there is an agreement.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Brock Mitchell, you're on again to present the proposed budget.
All right. Okay, board. So when I had an opportunity to accept this role 17 months ago, I did not know exactly what I was getting into, but I appreciated the opportunity to dive in. It's been a very educating year and a half, and I want to recognize Ben here. He joined, I think, 3 months after I did, and so what we were able to do is dive in with some really fresh eyes. And we're going to present the audited financial for 24-25, but I want to point out we were halfway through that year when we took over, and so what we stepped into really helped us see what we were working with. Over the last year, we've been able to really identify some areas where we wanted to recommend some changes and some adjustments with the help of the superintendent and the board. I know we've had multiple conversations about this, but what I want to present tonight is really a deep dive into some areas where I think it speaks volume as to why certain things have happened, where we need to make some adjustments, and how those adjustments are going to be made. It's really something that, as I dive in, this goes back 8+ years where I really start to see some concerns. And I think what happens is the ever-changing landscape of education just causes some really quick changes in school districts' abilities to fund programs. And what I want to do with this is transition into more of a sustainable model to where we know what we're expecting. We know what the revenues are going to be. We align our expenditures to those revenues to make sure we have a really good, stable foundation going forward. Everything that we're going to talk about tonight, all of the changes, all of the ways that we're going to make these changes are not going to have any impact to our tax base. We're doing all of this with no need for truth in taxation. And when I get to the point where we're generating some new general funds, I'll really explain why that's possible. But I want to emphasize that up front. Nothing we're going to ask the board to work with us on this is going to lead to any kind of increase in our certified tax rates. Okay? So the first thing I want to point out is our audited financials. And so this is going back to fiscal year 24-25. The 24-25 school year ends. You then have an audit that happens up through essentially December. And this was Ben's first audit. He worked very closely with our audit firm, did a great job getting these numbers ready. We presented these last January. These have been on our website since then, so there's nothing here that couldn't be looked at. But what I want to point out first to start is what's called a restatement. And I want to explain what this is and why this was necessary. So when we did this meeting last year, we anticipated our fund balance starting this year at $45.2 million. Okay? What happened over the course of the audit? There were some findings and some corrections that needed to be made that actually went back to 24-25 and had to fix those. Okay? And the amount that needed to be fixed accounted to $7.66 million. Okay? Now, this is not like lost money. These are expenses that should have happened in the past and should have been recorded in the past, but had been missed for some reasons. Okay? And so what I want to point out is our new starting fund balance, when you look at these audited financials, are the difference there, is that $37.6 million. Okay? Again, this was presented and has been on the website since then. But I want to explain exactly what happened in this. So again, this is not a loss of operating funds, no fraud. I know that was a concern up front. There was no fraud. It's not a budgetary shortfall. What it is there were some past accounting practices that were not up to the standards that should be expected. And credit to Ben and our auditors, they uncovered these and immediately put fixes in place. The first one was the summer of 2024. We have a magical date in the financial world of the end of a fiscal year. And the fiscal year ends June 30th, and one day later is too late because July 1st, we start the next fiscal year. All right? And so we make a payment each month to the Utah Retirement System, and a one-time $4.2 million payment overlapped into the next month. All right? And it was not identified back in the summer of 24. And so what ended up happening, there were 12 payments in one year, and 11 in another year, and then 13 in another year. So it just got off. And so it wasn't something that was identified quickly. And so through some reconciliation, it was found. Right? And so we had to go back and fix that. So that was $4.2 million there. The second part of that is what we're calling a long-running issue. The auditors could not identify how far back this goes. It could go back multiple administrations. And essentially what it is, it's in a remaining $3.4 million of accrued salaries and benefits. And essentially what happens is you got to think of it as like a slow drip in a bucket. I've got that analogy up there. Just little bits every payroll that were not reconciled. And so when your payments and your accumulations are not reconciled and zeroed and trued up, there opens up a gap. And every month that gap just got a little bit bigger. And again, we're not sure, the auditors weren't sure exactly how far back that went. What they were able to do is figure out what that gap was based on where expenses should have been, because we do have the actual expenses. And so what ended up happening, we caught that gap, we fixed it. Ben is working very closely with payroll to now do monthly reconciliations so that we are trued up every month. But that's where that $7.6 million restatement came in. And so essentially what that did is it doesn't change our cash flow. It doesn't change anything because those expenses had already happened. We just had to fix our financials to reflect that. Okay, with that being said, just kind of want to identify a new starting point. Okay, so our revenues, we get revenues from three areas: local, state, and federal. So our local levies, our investment incomes, and the others. The others tend to be a lot of donations, monies that come into the district in other areas. You'll notice that $10.7 million there. $5 million of that is that Intermountain Health donation for our Apex Center. So that's part of that local. State revenues are what the state gives us. Our state basic rate, that's the one the state actually sets that we have to levy in Weber County. The unrestricted and the categorical funds are off of the K-12 legislative estimates. And then our federal funds, our federal comes in, we get those for all of our title programs as well as our child nutrition programs. Okay, so you can see here the breakdowns of those. In 24-25, we received $345 million. Our expenses come down and they follow through these different funds. Instruction, student support services, school administration, district administration, the central, that's our finance, tech, and others, maintenance, custodial, and then transportation. You can see I broke those out into compensation and non-compensation. Compensation, think of that as anything as salaries and benefits. And you can see salaries and benefits are a huge portion of our expenses. In this particular year, it was 90.57%, and our non-comp was underneath that. And so you can see the subtotal there is $355 million. I want to kind of identify a few of those. So instruction is really anybody who works within the schools directly with students. Student support is anyone who supports students. Now, currently our student support really identifies themselves as our counseling departments. Okay? School administration and staff. Now the staff in those are all of the office employees. So when we talk administration and staff, it's our administrators, principals, assistant principals, some of our coordinators, and the staff that goes with them. District administration and staff, same idea. It's all of our directors and their office staff. Okay? The central is our finance, our tech services department, everything that works on those areas, maintenance, custodial, hopefully that's self-explanatory, and then transportation is all of our bus drivers and everything goes into that. One adjustment that we are looking to make is we want to re-identify and reclassify some of our student support services. There are other districts, and this was a bill that was started last year, and it ended up falling apart pretty early, just to truly identify who falls into which categories. And as school district administrators, business administrators, superintendents, there was a lot of support for this because we want to be able to identify exactly who falls into which categories. And so it did not go forward, but I have been working with some other districts. So as we get to the same slideshow next year, we are going to update some of these things because we want to be able to compare accurately. Child nutrition, you'll see here. We talk about local sales. So this is the students who are purchasing in the schools. We do have, through the state legislation, some of the state liquor fees. Statewide, districts get a portion of every sale at the state liquor stores. And then our federal allocations, those are reimbursements for free introduced and paid meals. You can see our food services brought in just under 15 million. And then expenses, again, compensation, non-compensation. One thing, if you dive deep into this, the food cost, because we went to a co-op, went way down. It was a really good decision. It drove those expenses, those non-comp expenses down quite a bit. Saved us quite a bit of money. And you'll see on the bottom of these slides, there is a remaining fund balance. One thing with child nutrition, back during COVID times when we did not bring in any local sales, all of it was funded by the government. We had a pretty healthy fund balance of well over $10 million. And so the state essentially said to all districts, you have to start driving that down. And so you can see here, we've got that down to about 2. The state recommends between 1 and 2, so we're right about where we want to be in our child nutrition. Capital is obviously used for buildings. So you've got your property tax portion, earning on investment, same idea as before. The state funds, we don't get a lot of state funds. Then you've got your other, this is sales, if we sell land, different things, bond proceeds. This is the last year of any bonding that we brought in, is this 24-25 school year. So you can see we brought in just under $102 million. Our expenses, compensation is a very small portion. A lot of that's non-compensation. This again is a skewed year because we were still finalizing some of our new builds. As we go forward in this will look very different because we won't have the bond proceeds and we won't have the building expenses. Okay, so that will change. But you can see down there on the bottom, our fund balance is $62 million as of fiscal year 25. Okay. Student activity is what happens in schools. And so essentially the idea with this is schools, we give Fund 1, we give general funds to schools, and it's not reflected here, it's reflected in the general fund. So schools are provided, obviously, some of that K-12 funding. This is our fees, student activity, class fees, donations, all these other funds that come into schools, and the idea being they are self-sufficient. So what they bring in, they pay out. Okay? And so this right here, you can see there was an over expenditure. Part of this is a block grant that we'd give the schools, and we've made a correction on this. This is, it reflects the general fund as a transfer. If you got into our financials, you'll see that there was a transfer here to keep this as a healthy fund balance. It's done every year just to make sure that this is self-sustaining, but for the most part it is. We're doing really well there. The foundation is a tricky one because what they bring in, they expect to put back out. So their idea here is to break even every year. And they give a lot of these funds right back to our schools. So our schools benefit from our foundations. They are audited separately, but we are required to report their financials as well. So that's why they're included in here. And then lastly, our debt service. Our debt service is used to pay off our bonds. And so you can see here we bring in a certain amount on our property tax. We have a debt service payments that go out. The idea here is we don't want to create a fund balance here. We want to have this basically breaking even every year, and we adjust this levy as necessary to make sure those payments can be made. When the opportunity comes to lower those because we are losing bonds, we have the opportunities to do that, and that has been done in the past. Okay, before I go on, any questions on last year's audited, or 2 years ago audited financials?
Just have a comment question. Years working in public accounting as a CPA and with various companies, I noticed that different companies classify different expenses in different categories. When you talked about the different categories, do you find that as you work with the business administrators for other districts. Are you finding that they classify things differently? We're not comparing apples to apples in many cases?
In many cases, yes. There is a state chart of accounts that we do follow, but it been uploaded a spreadsheet to UPEFS. It's an online reporting. And what it'll do is it'll check the different relationships between our funds, our programs, and our functions. And the functions are basically the categories that you saw on that first sheet. And if there's anything that's just off, they flag it and they send it back to us. And we had like 45 pages. And from what we hear from, this, again, our first time doing that was last year, they said that's pretty common. There's a lot of, and it's common because while there is some flexibility in the state chart of accounts, they like it a certain way, but it doesn't mean that it can't be changed and manipulated. So something that might land in instruction could also be student support. And what we've tried to do, we've identified a handful of employees that cause the flags. We're going to go back and we're going to fix those. We've worked with elementary to fix probably 500 employees already just by changing a function. It doesn't change where they're paid from. It just it changes the specification of why they're being paid.
Yeah.
But it's a long process. But yeah, we've got a lot of fixes to do. One of them being the exact thing you're saying, is making sure that people are categorizing them, in the specific purposes that they're being itemized for. We fund different programs. I know this is getting a little off topic, but it's good to know. We put a lot of our allocations into what we deem Object 56100, which is general supplies. And if everything was bought out of general supplies, it doesn't give us a lot of detail of what that actually is. So what we're doing is we're training our administrators and our administrative assistants, take that allocation and break it out into which categories you're actually going to spend it out of, like create a true budget. And then when we report that to the state, it actually makes sense to where those are coming from. So there may be some allocations on that first sheet, those non-comps, where it might be in instruction one year, and the next year it probably should be student services. And so we're going to make those adjustments in training. We have with 5,000 employees, it's hard to get all of this nailed down perfectly the first year, but we're working on it. We want to get that sheet of errors down to maybe 20 and work from there. But yeah, Doug, I think that's exactly the conversations that we've had, and that's why I mentioned that bill that we had hoped would go out, is because it would specify these are who needs to be in these categories.
Yeah, thank you.
Brock, can I ask just a clarifying question? We get concerns raised even tonight about the fact that we have higher administrative costs than larger districts around us. Could you speak to a little bit what you have found as you've looked, it relates to Doug's question, around that other districts sometimes will embed their administrative costs in instruction or in some of the other areas where we look at categorizing ours under administrative costs. Would you speak to that?
Yep, absolutely. I've talked with 3 or 4 different districts, and all close to us. Obviously, Box Elder, Ogden, Morgan, and Davis. They're the 4 that are closest to us. And the one thing that they point out specifically is their district administration, because we've had that concern brought up in the past, right? And so I wanted to ask some of those specific questions. And they've said the people they put in their district administration is their superintendency, their superintendent's administrative assistants, the HR directors and their administrative assistants, and their business administrator and their administrative assistants. And that's the entire district administration in a couple of those districts. Who we have in our district administration and staff is every director. So student services, curriculum, elementary, secondary, student access, special education, human resources, every director is under district administration and staff. And so it's not apples to apples. It is apples to oranges, and that is one of the things we are working to correct. Because it's something that I think the better we can get aligned district to district, the more it helps us. And so that, like I said, when you see this presentation next year, it will be different. These audited financials are what our report said when we took these positions. We've already made some of these adjustments. They're just not reflected here because we don't have those audited financials yet. Okay, so before I go into the final and the proposed budgets, that'll be the last thing I do before we ask you to approve those. I want to walk you through the many factors we've identified that put us in this financial position, and how we intend to build a healthier foundation. Okay, there is a lot of information here. Please stop me at any time. I invite you or anybody in the public to come and sit with me at any point. I would be happy to walk you through this, because this is not a one-year problem. This is a multi-year problem that we are trying to now look to control. So a couple things where I broke this out, I wanted to look at some external factors first. So things that we don't have direct control over. Things like the declining enrollment, state and federal funding shifts, vendors, and then some of these legislative mandates. Now, I do think one thing we need to do better as a district is go after some of these students who are not in our district. We've had these conversations. How can we market ourselves better? And so I think that's something that, with a little bit of effort, we will see change. And I know the Apex Catalyst Center is one of those initiatives that we're looking to do right off the start. Okay, let's dive into this.
Brock,
Yeah, go ahead.
really fast. One thing that I think has been really interesting is, our WPU is 4,800 for next year. The inflationary increase is 4.3. Is that what you said? Is that the WPU that we increased?
So the WPU percent is a 5-year average of the CPI.
No, but they give us an inflationary increase every year, right? The legislative.
Well, that's what 4.2.
Right. Okay, 4.2.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. So, as a USBA, as our delegate assembly, in past years, we've asked the legislature for a WPU increase of 8%, 13%. And this year at our meeting, we sat back and we're we're not even going to ask, because at this point, the legislature is only giving us the inflationary increase, which is 4.2%. And what's been interesting, as Wiley, I, and Doug sit on the finance committee, is some of these things that you were talking about is, we've got insurance coming in at 9%, and we've got all of these technical software things that are coming in at 8% increases every year. So it's really difficult to keep up with all of these things that we have no control over. It's been very eye-opening to me in the last 6 months, as we've really probably 8 months dug into all of this, is just the things that the legislature is cutting our income taxes, only giving us inflationary increases, but we're having to pay for more and more and more, and so much of it is beyond our control.
Yeah. And one key point about the 4.2%, that WPU, like I said, it's a 5-year average of the CPI, and that's a consumer pricing index. I want to say next year's average number that's dropping off as that 5-year moves is the largest one. And so it'll start to tick back down. So that 4.2 is just going to get smaller as those larger numbers drop off.
Well, and another thing was, I spoke to another person at USBA from another district who had been to a national school board meeting, and they spoke with someone from another state who was like, "Oh, we have one of the lowest WPUs in the nation. We only have 11,000 per student," and she was just dying, because we're second to last in the nation for WPU, and all these other states are sitting at $10,000-$11,000 per student. So.
Okay, first thing I wanted to make sure everyone understood is the difference between October 1st and ADM. We hear a lot of our October 1st numbers. It's used in legislative estimates. The only thing it actually funds is our at-risk funding. So it's a snapshot on October 1st of how many students are in all of our schools. Sorry, it gives us an idea of enrollment on that date, but it doesn't account for any enrollments or withdrawals the rest of the year. And again, it only funds our at-risk funding, and it is used to project that ADM legislative estimate. So if our October 1st number this year and next year, let's say, declined by 10%, they would take our ADM count and decline that by 10%. So that's how that's used. Now, again, that's just the estimate. It's a starting point. ADM takes into account all of our actual memberships. Okay, so in any particular school, it counts the number of kids that are in that school every single day of the year. And we get total numbers of membership days, and then they divide that by 180. That's how many ADMs that school has. Okay, so for any particular kid, if they're enrolled, not attending, but enrolled 180 days, we get one full ADM. If they are enrolled 90 days, they say they move in halfway through the school year, they get 90 divided by 180, which is half an ADM. Okay, and so obviously you can do the math from there. For a half-day kindergarten, they get, if it's a full year half-day kindergarten, they get 0.55 ADM. Okay, so that's the difference between a half-day and full-day kindergarten. Every other funding mechanism at the state level is tied to ADM. Okay, so everything else goes with that ADM. So what I did is I pulled some numbers. The top is our October 1st counts as a district going back to 21-22. Okay, so you can see our October 1st numbers here and the trend that follows. You can see a decline each year. Okay, now it's hard to say exactly what happened. I was a principal at Bonneville High School right around that time. And so what we would see is we'd see a heavy enrollment early. And as kids' families settle to start a year, kids would withdraw, and so the numbers sometimes drop by October 1st. Okay? What also happens sometimes October 1st, we'd get an influx of students from some charter schools, because October 1st is a day that charter schools get their funding. All of their funding comes off that October 1st count, so it's a little bit different there. And so you can see kind of the ebb and flow of our enrollments as far as October 1st comes. Okay? Down below that is the ADM counts. Okay? And I've color coordinated those for a reason. When we get our allocation, our legislative estimates, it's what is kind of estimated, but the funding doesn't actually come for a little bit later, because it is the end of the year, and then it takes some time to reconcile, and then they true it up here. Okay, so you can see there's a year's lag here. Now you'll notice that there's like a 2-student difference here. There's a 109 kid different there. There's some different reasons why the numbers go off. Part of it has to do with that where it switched from blue to green. That's when full day kindergarten came into effect and kind of skewed some of the numbers because of that 0.55 ADM. But you can see kind of how this works. Now what I did is I pulled this here. Okay, this 3319. This is off of our legislative estimate. So if you go back to that negotiation report, that 3319 matches that report. Okay, and you'll see the 778. If you remember, there were fractional students in there. That's how many students we anticipate losing. But what actually happened is last week we looked at our ADM report, and you can see there's our ADM count. That's below what our legislative estimate means. What that tells me is we're going to receive less funding because there's another, 80 or so kids that we're not accounting for. Okay, so even as we go into those negotiations, we have to assume their estimates, because we may come in underfunded of what we even think. Okay, now just for you guys' information, legislative estimates come in March. So I get these numbers first in March. We get our next update in November, and then we get the final in April. And every time I get those updates, these numbers tweak because of the way that the data is reported. Okay? Any questions on October 1st and ADM, how they're different or how they're funded? Okay, I now want to point out just some external financial pressures that we're seeing. We talked about the health insurance premiums. You can see the trends over the last 5 years here. On my slide in that negotiation, I said that those were estimates. If you'll notice along the bottom, I've got the actual costs for those years. Okay, so those were those actual costs at the end of those years that went out. The bolds represent the actuals were higher than the estimate. So when we create a budget, we estimate what those are going to be. You can see 3 of those 4 years, we actually came in higher. Some of those, there's some reasons behind them, and you have to dig into it a little bit. We jumped from 24 to 25. You can see that was almost $6 million more. We had a huge spike in people who enrolled for our insurance, which is great. That's why we provide that benefit. But it also does impact some of our financials because the district does take on a larger portion of that. Okay, so I just want to show where that's going. Again, fiscal year 27, we estimate that cost is going to be over $40 million. If we have additional employees that join, that's going to go up. Okay? If we have some that drop off, that will drop down. Okay? But that's kind of the difficulty of these estimations. The next one is just utilities. I was surprised at the fluctuation of utilities. You can see here again the 5-year costs. In fiscal year 23, I put that in blue because natural gas went up over $1 million that one year. It did drop back down the next year, but you can see sometimes those external things put these financial pressures that we can't just understand or expect. This year, our projected cost goes up over $7 million for utilities. A few of the other ones, I asked our purchasing agent to pull some of these. He gave me just an example. There are obviously more of these, but school bus costs have gone up 62% in the last 10 years, and we purchase 10 buses per year on average. They're about $206,000 per bus. They're expensive, but 10 years ago, they were like $128,000. So it's a huge increase. Home health services, these are for special education students, high need special education students. These have gone up 7% yearly. And these contracts are upwards of $100,000, and then just obviously 7% increases on top of that. I believe it was Kelly that mentioned early in our study session that special education is underfunded. This is part of what's happening, is the funding is just not keeping up with these increases.
Well, then you add the federal allocation decreasing because of the big beautiful bill on top of that.
Yeah. Chromebooks costs, this one is outrageous. Dr. Boyer-Thurgood and I have looked at this. The Chromebook costs have more than doubled in the last 3 years. And a lot of this is because of the chips and the expensive chips that go into these Chromebooks. These huge data centers are buying up all these chips, and there's just not the ones left for the Chromebooks. And so the manufacturers can just skyrocket those prices. And so those Chromebook costs have just gone outrageous. PowerSchool, those annual costs go up 7% each year. This is our student information system. It's also our Business Plus that runs our financials and human resources. So we have a lot of PowerSchool programs, and all of those individually are priced and go up 7% each year. Our RFP and contract management services have increased 38% in the last 3 years. We have decided to make a switch, and we're going to a state-provided program. They have actually just dropped that to no cost. So we're getting out of that one. So it's a little bit of a savings there, but you can see that's another one that's gone up. Just in the last 3 months, fuel expenses, and I know this is not news to anybody, but fuel expenses for the district went up over $100,000 per month in the spring season, in which we run a lot of buses in the spring season with athletics going all over the place, and then just transportation getting students to school. So you can see, again, that's an expense we have to figure out how to cover. Trash services in the last 5 years have nearly doubled, and obviously we have trash services at every school. And then our SRO contacts, Mr. Finley talked about that earlier tonight, but those annual increases have gone up in the past. We've done some work on that, but they've gone up on the past of 12.73% each year. So all of these things just continue to pile on. A few legislative ones. There's a lot here. And so again, I invite you guys to ask some questions if you have them. But educator salary adjustment, Nicole talked a little bit about this. But one thing she pointed out is we covered the expense. I think Kelly had asked that question. We did cover the expenses for those non-ESA generating employees and those benefit costs. The $10,350, now $10,661, that is just salary. That's not benefits. You have to add benefits on top of that, benefits, retirement, everything that goes into it. But those costs for those employees that did not generate were over $1 million per year for the district, just to make those employees whole. Full day kindergarten, when they implemented that, it increased staffing and supervision in schools. There was additional classroom furniture that had to be put in, retrofitting of some classrooms. Plus, if you figure you can no longer share materials morning and afternoon in those half days, you needed a full new set of instructional materials, and so those had to be purchased. A legislative mandate a few years ago, we can no longer charge for educator background checks, and so that ends up being roughly $62,000 per year now that we cover. We still have to pay for them, we just can't charge for those. School fees, we can no longer charge certain school fees. That came about a few years ago. And for fee waive students, the state does not provide us any funding for those. And so between the combination of the twos of the lost fees and the fees that we waive for students, that's roughly $1 million per year. The tricky thing with that is when schools can't provide fees to run classes, we don't cut the classes. We provide that funding through other means, and so we absorb that into our K-12 budget. Postpartum leave, that's a relatively newer one, but we anticipate that increasing substitute teacher expenses. I think it's a great benefit, but it does obviously impact us financially. And then there are multiple other bills that require some funding one way or another, but the majority comes in labor costs and what it takes to make sure that we're in compliance. All right. A few other eliminations. These are ones that through different legislative actions over the last handful of years, cut programs. This last year, they eliminated the DTL program, and that's $900,000 that we received each year. There was a 5-year allocation, and so they pulled that back. We'd had that planned and budgeted. We reduced some staffing based on employees taking other positions, and we've moved everything else that was covered into that into some form of K-12 funding. Professional staff, this is the one that a few years ago was above the line, and if you remember, in one of our past board meetings, I kind of differentiated the idea between above the line and below the line. Above the line grows with the WPU. And so we got $20+ million. And so when you add that WPU every year, that just grows, right? It's a huge benefit. When they moved that below the line, it lost that WPU increase. And when it was growing, that's about $1 million every year. And that was designated specifically for salaries. And so when they moved that, we lost about $1 million per year in funding that should be going towards salaries. And so we still have all that funding, it just doesn't grow the same. They eliminated library book resources. We moved that into K-12 funding. They eliminated the school nursing funding. We moved that into K-12 funding. And then they changed the Beverly Taylor Sorensen funding. This used to cover half an FTE, and now it covers $35,000. And so what that really is, if it equates to an FTE, that's about a third of an FTE. So again, there's a difference there that we have to cover somehow. We're not cutting programs, we're just absorbing that on other places, right? And so it creates some strain. A couple more of these. There was an elimination of early literacy programs, and that was $675,000. Now they did, in this last legislative session, bring in some new legislation around this. There is some funding tied to this, but in the years in that gap, all of this was absorbed into at-risk and K-12. Early intervention, we used to receive $1.2 million for early interventions. When they did full-day kindergarten, they just absorbed that and no longer funded early intervention. And so they expected essentially full-day kindergarten to pick up that slack there. EL software grants, we have those for our EL students. That used to get $100,000. That was cut, and now it's absorbed in the K-12. So again, we are still funding these. Dual immersion, they provided a lot of startup costs, and there's been a lot of conversation around dual immersion. They've obviously pulled back that funding. And so we will have, that staffing that we have to pick up. We did get, again, in full transparency, some new funding next year. This is coming in because of some restructuring being done at the state. So we will get some additional funding this year for dual immersion, and I know Director Jamie Ellis has some really good plans with that. And then kind of to speak to something that was brought up early, we supplement special education and transportation every year, somewhere around $6+ million. And so just those shortfalls in those areas, we do fill those gaps. Okay. So again, with all that, I just wanted to point out some of those legislative estimates. On the capital side, I think this is worth talking about because we do, I showed earlier there is some capital funds there, but the capital can't sustain all of this. And we've talked about this, and I know Lane's done a great job explaining this, but I do think it's worth looking at again where all of these things are in our school safety amendments. Nobody argues that these are great things to keep our schools safe. It's just we need the funding. And so that's one of those things where we continue to advocate through our JLC group to help with these unfunded mandates. But you can see the costs that are going into those. Okay? We have received 2 grants for audio enhancement and door locks. Those have totaled up to $4.36 million. But just to finish the door locks, it was going to be $12 million. Audio enhancement to fix is going to be another $6 million. So it's great, but we absolutely need more. Okay, before I go to this next section, because we're kind of changing directions again, any questions on any of these legislative mandates or cuts, anything there?
Just a comment about costs. You mentioned utilities going up significantly, and I represent Precinct 5, basically the Bonneville Cone, and you remember in August when school starts, that second floor of Bonneville facing south is a real sweatshop. I get a lot of complaints from people about it's just too hot. Yep. And about half, I'm on the Capital Improvements Committee, about roughly half of our 40+ schools don't have air conditioning, and we get complaints about that. But if we had to retrofit all of the remaining school buildings with air conditioning, it'd be a cost through the roof.
Yeah.
And that would be a significant expense, and when we build a new school, replace an old one, we do that, but it's gonna take time.
That's right.
That would be a significant expense.
Yep. It's a lot of hidden costs that aren't seen, but they are realized. They are absolutely realized. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show is just basically these are all numbers from our audited financials. I went and pulled these. You can see over the last 6 years what the property taxes came in, what the state funded, what the federal funded. Also on that top, I have the WPU increase. Okay, and when you look at this on the surface, it doesn't tell a very good story. You could start to make some inferences, but it doesn't tell a lot. So I want to dive in and figure out exactly what was happening during these years, because I think it's important to understand why in 21-22 to 22-23, our property taxes went up significantly, but our state tax took a major hit. And then why did our property tax drop the next year and state tax go so far up, right? And so there's some unknowns that I wanted to dive into. I wasn't in this role, so I really had to try and get in the mind of some of the past decisions. But again, you can see the WPU increase. There are some significant ones that happened those few years, but that, again, when inflation was high, the WP was tied to the CPI, and so as that CPI starts to dip, we'll see those numbers come down. The bottom one, you'll see the general fund expenses, and then the payroll expense that goes into that, and non-comp. Non-comp, again, everything that does not go into salaries and benefits. Okay, so everything that goes into that. And then you can see the percent that goes into the payroll. Now I put that on there because when we talk about saving funds and saving money, the biggest way to save funds is through payroll, right? And I don't say that lightly, because what we are not in the business of doing is taking advantage of our employees. We want to support our employees and give them what they deserve. But what we've seen with our enrollment trends and our staffing didn't match. And so this is something that we're going to talk about. And then that bottom line, you'll see the COLA and how that comes into play. So one just key piece that I want to point out. During the negotiation presentation, we talked about a 4.2% WPU increase, and that ended up with a 0.65% COLA. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? And so I want to recognize that. But if you go back to 2019, 2020, the COLA was higher than the WPU increase. Same thing in 2021. 21-22 was just slightly below. 22-23, again, it was higher than that. And so when the COLA is higher than WPU increase, you've got to find other ways to fund that in a lot of places. And a lot of times that comes through either a truth in taxation or through fund balance, use of fund balance. And that was some of what was used in those years. And so, I wanted to point out some of those things just to kind of be very transparent in what we're looking at here. Okay, so I want to dive into some of the specifics. And I want to, again, key in on the change fiscal year 21-22, 22-23, and then 23-24, and some of the property taxes and some of the state amounts there. And one thing I pointed out last year, but it's really evident here, shortly after COVID, we got a lot of ESSER funding, a lot of federal funding. And what we were able to determine is there were a lot of ongoing expenses from one-time funds, which creates a problem, right? You should have one-time expenses for one-time funds, and that had not been the practice. And so when we talk about some of these increases, just know that those are layered in there. Okay, so some of those major shifts in these years. I want to spend a little bit of time on this, and again, this is one where if you want to know some more of the details, I would happily sit with you and talk you through them. But down at the bottom, I've got a little bit of a key that tells you what these abbreviations mean. SR is state revenue, LR is local revenue, and EX is obviously expense. But the first one up there, our state revenue increased and our expenses increased. That year, they added educator professional time, which I talked about earlier as paid professional hours. So the state allocated a pretty significant amount of money to all districts. So that's going to raise your state income. State revenues, but it's also going to raise your expenses because that money's paid out. The thing about that is that's restricted funds. It is designated for one specific purpose. Okay? So when we say our revenues went up, it did, but it's earmarked for a specific expense, right? So we can't use that for other areas. It has to be used for what it's designated for. The second one, is a state revenue increase. There was a funding that was added to all school districts. It was reserved for capital, but it came in on the legislative estimate. So when you look up here, that state line has that money in it, but it's actually reserved for capital. And what that's used for is any capital projects that districts had. And that was given back again in 23. We held on to it. We're actually utilizing it this year that we're finalizing right now. And so that'll become some unearned revenue that we'll get at that time. But it was originally given to us on that allocation. The third one down there is local revenue. There was a truth in taxation for us, that 7.5% COLA. I'm sure you guys all remember that one. That was as Superintendent Butters was coming in. That was her first summer. There was that truth in taxation, and that was designated for salaries. So when I mentioned that sometimes when your COLA is higher than your WPU, you've got these levers to pull. The truth in taxation is one of those, and again, that's why our local revenues went up. And then a state revenue decrease. This is one that took me a little bit of time to really look in and figure out what happened. But as you look at these legislative estimates, when the legislative estimate comes in, there's a board and voted levy. And our legislative estimate had that listed at $16 million. And so that was $16 million of state revenue on the estimate. Our final had $5 million. And so there was an $11 million reduction in our state funding. And the reason that happened is we're guaranteed a certain pot of money from the board and voted. It can either come from the local or the state avenues. We received all of it, but we received it from the local and not the state. They kind of create a balance in those two. What happened is it wasn't adjusted for in the budget. And so it was double budgeted and double expensed. And so it created just a little bit of an upside down there. In 23-24, that was when full-day kindergarten was implemented, and so there was some revenue increase because the WPUs went up, but obviously expenses because we had more teachers. The second one, state revenue increased, expenses increased, and so again, I'm going to come back to this. We're talking this year here, you can see a huge jump in state. Okay, so that's the one I'm really pointing out here, is this big jump in state. And so what happened again is that ESA value doubled. Nicole talked about the additional $4,200 jumping onto that, plus $504 for the new adjustment that happens every year. So you figure when that ESA 42, it ended up being like almost $5,000 plus salary or plus benefits, pretty good increase for every educator in our district. That's a huge state revenue increase and a huge expense increase. And so again, coming back here, you'll see our expense on that bottom line, 23-24, is much higher that year because those funds came in and they had to go back out to those teachers. But again, those are restricted funds. And that, to me, again, kind of told a huge story to me, is even though our revenues went up, they were restricted. We could not use them for general purposes. They had kind of earmarks to them. The third one there, state revenue decrease, expenses were the same. This is where all those programs were cut. And so at the state level. So we lost all of that revenue, but we did not cut the programs. So we had to pick those up somewhere. So the revenue decreased, but our expenses remain the same. And again, anytime that happens, you're creating a little bit of an upside down. The fourth one down there, local revenue decrease and state revenue increase. What happened here? There was a truth in taxation, and there was a voted levy that was swapped to capital. And that was done to correct this on this side. That was the theory behind it. What ends up happening is, if you come back to here, you'll notice our property taxes that first year, or this year to this year, dropped by $9.5 million. What essentially was done is it took general funds and moved them to capital. And as soon as you take general funds and move them to capital, you now restrict them. They have to be used for capital. So you lose the flexibility of being able to use them for anything general, which includes salaries. And so as salaries increase, we don't have the revenue to support that, all right, especially with this change. So that was a big shift there. And then the last one on there, the expense increased. Notice I did not put any revenue The expense increased because we staffed Westfield, Mountain View, and Haven Bay. Those 3 new schools needed non-teaching staff. We know that teachers follow students, so we didn't have that issue, but everybody else in the school, we had to find that staffing. There was a truth in taxation that was done that year, and part of that was moving, I mentioned earlier, when the debt service drops off, you can move it. Part of that was moving that debt service to help with the capital funding for the lease revenue bonds, but all of it was worked in. But again, that bottom one, without any new revenues and new staffing, that just increases your expenses. So I point all this out. Like I said, I want to do a deep dive and figure out why these numbers look the way they looked. This tells a bigger story to me than just looking back at what happened here. All right, this actually gives some context to those numbers. Just wanted to put that chart in a bar graph, kind of show what you can see year by year. The greens are our revenues, the blues are our expenses. You can see each year going back to 1920, the expenses outpace the revenues. Now, what I did not include here is the revenue from investments, because I wanted to just look what truly is coming in and what's going out. Investments are very fluid based on the market. So if we grew our fund balance, if you dive in and look at this and you grew our fund balance, the difference there is the investments that went into that. But this is state, local, and federal compared to the expenses that go out. Okay? The last one that you'll see up there on the far right, I didn't have that in the chart. Those are the projected for the year that we're just wrapping up. One thing I want to point out, again, those are projected, and those are projected from the budget that you will see shortly. But the light blue, the additional expense, or non-comp expense, is the same or will be just slightly above last year's. And I point that out in that we've taken some actions in the non-comp. When we got our audited financials, that was in January of this year. We couldn't make significant staffing changes this year, but we could make some adjustments to our non-comp expenses. And so in some conversations with our superintendent and many of the board members, we put some different things in place, and I think we've made some of those non-comp adjustments. And those are going to continue on, and I've got some of those highlighted shortly. So board, what I want to do is just lay out what are we going to do to fix this, right? To turn kind of these trends. And so there's 2 levers when you're talking fund balance. We can reduce expenses, okay? And that's absolutely something that has to be done. So there's a couple areas. One is we target areas where we have exceeded staffing ratios, okay? Now, one thing I want to point out, we're not changing staffing ratios in the elementary. Those have been set for quite a while. We want to make sure that our lower grades are staffed appropriately, because that's where the research says the most impact comes when those staffing ratios are appropriate. So we have not changed those at all. The tricky thing, I was a high school principal, it's easier to staff on some levels a high school because it's one class here and there, right? You can move one block. When you talk about elementary, it's an entire class. And so it's tricky at an elementary. So when we say we staff at a certain ratio, 1 or 2 kids over, yeah, it goes above that staffing ratio, but it doesn't necessarily dictate a whole new class. So working closely with Assistant Superintendent Hales and Elementary Director Heather Nielsen, we have really looked at those. And once it hits a certain threshold, we are going to staff that school appropriately. And so that's something that as the school year gets started, we meet pretty regularly, and we're going to continue to look at that. The other areas, we're going to assess all non-comp expenditures. We put some really firm guidelines in place, and I'll touch on a few of those. And what we're hoping with those two levers is it helps create a really healthy long-term fund balance recovery. The second part is you can increase general fund revenues. Now, there's not a lot of ways to increase revenues. As a public school district, you're pretty restricted, right? You can work with the levies. You can hope that the state provides some additional ones, and you can use what's called unearned revenues. And so we are going to use these unearned revenues aggressively during this next audit just to try and make sure that we are utilizing everything that we are entitled to. And that's something that the audit starts tomorrow, realistically. They're coming out to start that process, but it won't actually get into full force until September. And so through September, October, we're going to dig in and find every way to make sure that we are maximizing those revenues that have not been utilized. But here's our kind of plan, our key rationale. Our general fund balance is healthy, right? And the reason is because some of those shifts that moved it from general to capital a few years back. That is a little bit of a saving grace, okay? I will say that. It's the one silver lining we have in this.
You said our general fund is healthy. You mean
Oh, sorry.
capital? Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Capital, thanks, Kelly. Our capital fund is healthy. Our general fund dollars are obviously less restricted. So we are going to utilize our capital fund levy to address our general funds. Now, when I get to that slide, don't panic. I double checked everything today in the system, and it all works. So we're set on that one. But I want to point out some reduction measures that our superintendent has laid out on this. She's dug into every corner of the district to see what can be done. And all of this is done strategically and to essentially right-size our staffing. So 3 district-level administrator positions are being reduced. Our assistant superintendent through retirement and 2 directors are being reduced. 3 school-level administrative positions are being eliminated. 2 reduced role administrative positions. So they were interns and now elementary apprentices. There are 7 district level support positions eliminated. And when I talk about those, a couple examples, there's a few in HR. There's one in our business department. We're reducing an accountant. There's other departments that are doing their part just to absorb some of these positions. There are 60 absorbed administrators educators, and this goes with enrollment trends. And so as employees retire or separate for other employment opportunities, Nicole had mentioned this, those are the ones that are being absorbed. And sometimes this happens a little later. Since the school's ended, we continue to see those separations come in, and so we are going to analyze and assess every position, whether it's a licensed teacher, an office staff, a custodian. We're going to look to see, does that position need to be replaced? And that's something that's going to have multiple sets of eyes on going forward. There are some reductions of summer days, and those are some different support staffs. And those were days that we were approached about those by those support staffs. They basically said, we don't utilize these days. We'd rather have our summer back. So those are some different expenses that we can bring back. We've reduced teacher buyouts at the secondary level. We've frozen steps and lanes for this year. We've adjusted part-time custodial formulas. We want to make sure that we're not allocating more part-time custodians to schools than they need, because those are expenses. We're eliminating one-time monies from ongoing programs. That's something that has to be done. If it's not something that can be covered in an ongoing way, we have to find a way to either eliminate it or find other means for it.
Brock,
Yes.
just to reiterate, a lot of those positions, if they compare districts, a lot of those positions are instructional positions in other districts classified as administration expenses in our district, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the SRO contract, I mentioned a few slides ago, I think it was like 12.7%. We now know that those increases are predictable. We know exactly what those are going to be. So that's staffing, and we're going to have to look at this every year, and those reductions are going to match enrollment. They have to match enrollment because that's where our funding comes in. And it can't just be our teachers, right? If we have fewer students, do we need the same number of support staffs, right? So we have to look at every position across our district, and I think we're committed to doing that. Additional adjustments, we've reduced every department's budget by at least 5%. Many departments have taken a much larger reduction than 5%, and that saved $1 million going forward. We're reclassifying capital expenditures to capital funds. That had not always been the case. Chromebooks, copiers, engineering fees, some of that had been expensed out of general funds, and it should have been capital funds. And so we want to make sure that we're not utilizing general funds, which are narrow, when we should be using capital funds. And so we've already identified about $1.5 million where we're going to make that switch. We're switching from ClassWallet to Amazon. It's a small small amount, but it's something where it actually makes a lot of sense. And this is teacher supply money. The legislature supplies out monies for our educators. I want to say it's 95, 96% of all of our purchases are on Amazon anyway. But we're paying $50,000 to Class Wallet because we've done it for a long time. It doesn't make sense to continue that. So we're making a change there. We're restructuring how employees travel. When COVID hit, we didn't want people coming into buildings to make payments. So we went online and we removed credit card fees. We did some analysis of this. And over the last few years, it's been over $330,000 per year in credit card fees that the district is just absorbing. And so in talking with a lot of other districts, they're now putting that back on to those different transactions. We are going to put a cap on that. So if it's going to be X percent or X dollars. So it's not an unlimited amount. But we feel like that's a way for us to put that money back where it should go into the classrooms. And then we're reviewing every other district and school expenditures. Part of my job is to educate our principals on how to budget better and where to spend their money and what is kind of frivolous spending. And so we're going to work hard on that. Last couple things. There's a few possibilities to increase revenues outside of truth and taxation. One is to utilize those unearned revenues. I talked about that. We have some in TSSA, at-risk, concurrent enrollment, advanced placement, CTE. Essentially, when the state gives us revenue, they expect us to use that. If we don't use it, it just kind of goes aside. We can't recognize it as revenue until we have expenses that qualify. And so this year, we are looking at every expense that qualifies that we can now say we have this revenue. So we anticipate our revenues increasing by about $3 million. We don't have that on our budget sheets right now because it's not recognized yet, but it will throughout the audit. We increase our free and reduced lunch applications, and that helps with our at-risk funding. We want to provide the benefits to the students who need it. So we've asked our schools to start spreading that word. It benefits the students, but it also benefits our district because that at-risk funding is a legislative priority and it will continue to grow. That's something that we're in year 6 of a 10-year commitment, and if they uphold their commitment, it should continue to grow for a few more years. And then we're going to use our significant capital capital fund balance to make some adjustments to the general fund. And so that is where I want to point this out here. So when you get into levies, it gets kind of a nuanced piece of this, but what happens is we have 3 levies that we can, as a board, you can as a board, set from year to year. And as long as the revenue total, so if we were to take the sum of these two, as long as the sum of those do not increase from one year to another, we can manipulate and move these numbers around, right? Basically what we're saying to the county is we're not going to increase the amount that we're asking from you. We're just going to designate how it's utilized differently. And so what we are proposing to the board, this is our strategic levy shift, is to take that capital outlay levy and reduce that significantly. You can see there it goes from 1447 down to 0.00062. That's going to decrease the revenue into capital. You can see that on the bottom line there, from 35 million down to just under 16 million. But what that does is we can reallocate that difference into the board and voted, and you can see what it does to our general revenues. It jumps that up $23.5 million. And that $23.5 million now becomes unrestricted. So it takes that restricted capital label off of it. Now this is not new funds, right? This is the exact same funds we got last year. I think that's really important to designate. This is not new funds, but we can use this to build our general funds better. And we basically, what's going to happen is we're going to lean into that general or that capital fund balance and just slowly decrease that down by shifting it over to the general. And so we got our tax rates just yesterday. I worked to make sure all the math calculates out, and this change does work, and it does not require a truth in taxation because we have no new funds coming in. questions on this, because this is kind of the big piece of this meeting.
What does that put our tax increment at with that change?
So if you take the sum of these two, now the one piece of the board that's not in here is the charter school. We have $2 million that's not calculated in this. We don't have any of that. That is a pass-through amount. It gets levied, but we don't
But
see a
it's
penny of it.
included in the
But
certified
it's included,
tax. Yeah.
It's included there, yeah. So if you were to take this and add those together, you're looking, what is that, 25.2? So our tax increments would be 25.2, which, if you remember, last year we want to get above 20 because the state guarantees 20. This also puts us above 20. So we will increase our state funding as well.
Then that also gives us some buffer for as our tax rate inevitably goes down
Right.
year over year.
Yeah, and that's a great point. If you were to go back and look at this number here, the sum of those three and the sum of these three are smaller because each year that rate just slides backwards. I know I'm running along. I'm sorry, board. Last couple things. We refunded the general obligation bonds. This happened a couple board meetings ago, and just want to point out these are a few additional things we're looking to cut expenses. When we refunded those general obligation bonds, it's not money back into our pocket, it's future savings, because essentially what it does is think of it as a home loan. You take a 30-year loan, you refinance it 15 years, you pay it off earlier, you pay less interest. And so that interest savings, if you expand it all the way across the life of that, would have been $3.18 million. Net present value is $1.66 million of savings. And that is savings that our local tax base will not incur because those are reduced. When we paid off this year's payment early, we paid it in February, and that saved $40,000 in savings because we made our payment on all of our other bonds last week. So just that difference there was $40,000 on those. We contracted with MGT, you guys know that. That's going to help us inform decisions on staffing and schools in the future. That will be obviously some future decisions, but that encompasses staffing ratios, enrollment trends, everything that goes into that. I mentioned earlier the unearned revenue and capital. We will raise our capital by $3.2 million. And when I say we're diving into our capital fund balance, these are two ways that we could see that just rebound slightly, right? The unearned revenue. And then we do own the land next to Roy Jr., which we're estimating at about $3 million. And if we choose to sell that, that would go straight back into our capital. We have implemented, with the board president and superintendent's guidance, monthly finance committee meetings with Vice President Hurst, board members Larson and Williams. We meet monthly to talk about these things that had not been done in the past. And so those monthly meetings have really helped us to decide which directions we want to go. I think they've been very powerful. And the last thing is, again, Ben is a huge addition. But one thing we've done is we've created tracking models. We've done projections. We can see in real time where we think we're going to land and pivot much more efficiently than, this may be a little speculation, but I think that had been done in the past. So we want to make sure that you guys know we are looking at this daily and some of these adjustments that we feel like we need to make.
I just wanted to point out to the rest of the board that we are meeting monthly with the MGT, that they're giving us monthly check-ins. And at our meeting, what's today, Wednesday, on Monday, they talked about what they're doing, what one of their staff members doing right now is they're in the middle of working with all of the municipalities to work on their developments to know exactly what's coming into the county. Because I know there's a lot of speculation on growth and what's coming in and what's not. So that forecasting study will give us exactly those new growth areas, and then they'll come up with the student yield.
And we have a 3-year contract with them, so they'll reassess all of that data every year for 3 years. So with all that being said, final part of this. What I'm going to show you next is the final budget for 25-26 and the proposed working budget for 26-27. It's important to remember the final budget is just a budget, right? We'll work through the audit to finalize things, and things that we anticipate are revenues increasing, right? Some of those expenses decreasing because we want to prepare a budget that when the audit comes, we don't have any findings that we're expending or exceeding our expenditures. So when I show you this, just understand that will change when it comes to that left column, which is the final. Okay, so just want to point that out. Okay, all of this information, the budgets can be found on our website, WSD.net, under Departments, Support, Business, Financial Reports. All of our audited financials, our yearlies are there. So if you want to pull those up, you can. And David, if you'll pull up that last little bit. Okay, so board, you have these copies. I'm not going to spend time going through every line, but I want to point out just a couple that I've highlighted in the different colors. So the actual amounts are the ones that we went through. Those are our audited financials. Those are done. That center column is our new final budget. So we proposed a budget this exact time last year that everything just shifted one column to the left, essentially. Okay. So what I want you to notice is with our aggressive change in that top line, kind of that salmon color, that is what we anticipate to happen from one year to the next as those levies shift. The other thing here is notice the federal last year is 13.3 million. We budgeted pretty well below that. We don't get a lot of those. The federal fiscal year is different than ours. Theirs runs through September 30th. So we don't get all of our finals until September for the federal. So those continue to trickle in. So again, that's just something I wanted to point out. Those are low, but they tend to kind of end up right around that $13 million amount. David, if you go to the bottom of the next one. Okay, this right here is where I hope you see the turnaround. So this year, and again, these are not final, but what that first orange shows is that our expenditures exceeded our revenues by $23 million, which means we overspent what we brought in, right? With the shifts that we make next year, some of the reductions in expenditures, the increase in revenues, we see that change by $26 million the other direction, right? And so what we're anticipating that year is for that fund balance to start to grow again. These are, again, a lot of projections. This is the hard thing about these numbers is we're almost always a year behind knowing the true amount, right? But we, again, feel pretty confident in what we're projecting out because we're looking at this all the time and we're making adjustments constantly. What I point out in the purple down there, you'll see that 25.394. That is the new amount at the end of last year, and that reflects that restatement that we had to do. That would leave us with an ending fund balance this year of about $1.5 million, right? And so, which is scary, which is very scary. Which, you know, hopefully I don't say this too lightly. We have to make some aggressive changes, which is why I've presented some of that to you guys. And what we're hoping to see is with these changes, with some of our adjustments as we go forward, hopefully with some increased enrollment, we see that fund balance start to grow again. But when we bring that money that was moved to capital back into the general funds, where you know it should have been the last couple of years, I think it would have changed the game overall. But right now, hopefully you see that we have a plan. And we're getting aggressive with this plan, and I think it's the only way to go forward with this. And then David, last page, and then I think done. Just want to show what happens to that capital. And so you can see this year we anticipate bringing in $38 million in revenue. With that shift, that drops that down to $16 million. And so when we talk about watching our expenses, it can't just be in the general fund. It has to be in capital also because we are now going to utilize a lot of those revenues in a different manner. So I want to point out this because as we look at this, we're looking across every aspect of our district to make sure we're doing the right things financially. Any questions you guys have for me?
What are you going to do in your spare time?
I've got two little kids that take up a lot of it.
Brock, thank you so much. Ben, the work you've done has been extraordinary. Thanks for a wonderful presentation done with clarity and giving us a clear path where we need to go.
And I'd like to second that. Thank you to Brock and Ben. Appreciate we're in good stead with that. And where would the world be without accountants?
I would also just like to say that even though this took some time, I so appreciated the fact that we were given details and transparency and that it was presented in an understandable way for us to wrap our minds around what's going on with our district finances. And not only that, but how we're going to accomplish reversing that. So
Yep.
it's really
Thank you.
good.
Thank you. Okay, board, before we consider the formal approval of the final budget for 25-26 and the proposed budget for 26-27, we'll hold a public hearing to receive public input on the budget. I need a motion to move into the public hearing. Janice and Wiley. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. So we've begun our public hearing. We've had no one sign up to give any comments tonight, so that means that we can close our public hearing. So, board, I need a motion to move from the public hearing back to our regular school board meeting. Can I have a motion for that, Kelly? And Bruce is a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks again, Brock and Ben, for everything that you've done.
I can't help but ask, is a round of applause appropriate?
Superintendent, your turn.
Yes, so, board, first of all, I want to say and echo everything that's been said. I have never seen two individuals go to work into the financial workings of the district like these two have. I'm really super proud of them and grateful for them. They've been a joy to work with. They're men of integrity. And I'm anticipating that we're gonna move this in the right direction and be able to get back to honoring our employees with appropriate advances going forward, and that is the goal. I have to read a resolution. It's in your packet. It's the use of undistributed reserves resolution, and I'm going to need to ask for your authorization. So, board, I'll just read it verbatim. The board is being asked to consider the resolution authorizing the appropriation of up to $6 million from undistributed reserve to our maintenance and operation expenditure classifications. And board, this is only if it's needed as we work through the audit this fall, to meet current year-end operating obligations and maintain a positive M&O fund balance. This resolution states that the full amount may not be needed, that any unused portion will remain in reserve or be reclassified back to reserve, and that the appropriation will not be used and cannot be used in the negotiation and settlement of contract salaries for district employees. So I'm asking for your approval of that resolution.
Okay, thanks, Superintendent. Board, I would look for a motion to approve the resolution appropriating undistributed reserve to the maintenance and operation expenditure classifications as presented. Could I get a motion for that? Wiley, a second, please. Doug, thank you. Questions or discussions?
I just have
Go ahead.
one comment, or actually it's a question for Brock. When we had the audit several months ago, I know Ben spoke to I don't remember what the professional group was, but there is a professional group that talks about what our goal fund balance should be, because clearly it's too low. Can you just speak to that for the rest of the board?
Yeah, it's the GFOA, and what their recommendation is at least 2 months of 2 months of the expenses for. Sorry, I just had an M&M, it got stuck. 2 months expenses of the general fund, and so if you take, just for easy math, and say we're 300 million, you take 10% of that is. Sorry, Ben, am I? Okay, yeah. Ben's our accountant on staff, so it'd be 60 million. So yeah, so 2 months worth would be 60 million, and so if our expenses were at 300 million, that's what it would be. So you take 2 months worth.
So
of that.
one reason I just wanted to point that out is last year during Truth and Taxation there was a lot of conversation statewide about what kinds of fund balances were sitting in district coffers, and ours was, I don't remember what they were stating we had. It was really high and it wasn't accurate. So I just wanted to point out that one, that wasn't accurate, and two, a fund balance of 60 million is kind of the minimum that we should be having that isn't over the top or anything like that. And so that's something that we're working towards, but clearly we've got a long way to go. And that's impacted our financial ratings in a negative way, if you want to speak to that.
That is true. Yeah. So Moody's and Fitch, if you've heard of them, they come in and rate each district when we go to bond, and we just obviously did a bond refunding, and they look at our general fund balance and where that's at, and there's a ratio that's created in that. Because of where we're at, we're kind of been put on monitor status, and we were downgraded on one of those ratings. They just asked for what's your plan going forward, and I've laid out a very similar plan in this, but it does actually, significantly impact ratings if it's not moving in the right direction.
Okay, we had our two motions. All in favor, please. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, so time for my recommendation. So board, I recommend that the board approve the final amended budget for the 25-26 fiscal year and structurally adopt the proposed budget for the 26-27 fiscal year as presented in tonight's public hearing.
Thank you, sir. Board, I'd look for a motion to approve the final 2025-2026 budget as well as the proposed 2026-2027 budget. Doug, Bruce, any comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Again, thanks Brock and Ben for everything you've done. That's a lot of work. Thank you. Heidi, please. Heidi Alder, please.
Good evening, board. I will try to make this quick. I know it's late and you're still not done. We have two policies that I will present first that are just request a second, an approval on second reading. The first policy is our purchasing policy, and we just made some updates to make sure that we were in line with current procurement thresholds and added a provision requiring legal review of contracts. We didn't have any comments or feedback in the month since we presented it on first reading. So I would present policy 3300 to the board to be adopted on second reading.
Thank you. Board, I need a motion to approve the revised policy 3300 purchasing on a second reading. Janice and Jan, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Go ahead.
The next policy is our student discipline policy, policy 5200. Director Warren and Director Hardy worked on this to make sure that the policy includes changes to definitions in the statute, as well as adapting and including a multi-tier system of support that we are practicing in our schools. We just wanted to include that into our policy. We didn't have any feedback or changes that were made since the last presentation, and so we would ask the board to adopt policy 5200 on a second read.
Thanks. Board, I need a motion to approve revised policy 5200, student discipline, on a second reading. Bruce and Jan, comments, questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Policy 6250 is a new, it's an amended policy. This policy changes the way that we make adjustments to boundaries, and also that we go through, the process we go through for school closures. We had a number of members of the public suggest some modifications and some amendments to this policy. We read through those suggestions, met as a policy committee several times, worked with our elementary directors and our secondary directors. Primarily it affects our elementaries, and came up with a different process for when the board has to go through a school closure and adjust boundaries. Sometimes we adjust boundaries without going through a school closure, but we would always have to adjust boundaries when we do go through a school closure. And I'm just gonna take 2 minutes to sum up the process. I'll try to condense it for you all. One of the biggest criticisms that the district faced when we were looking at the Lowman View closure was transparency. And so that is one of the pieces we wanted to make very clearly a part of this new process. The new process would establish an open study, which is always ongoing. It's an informal assessment and review of the district's needs, special enrollment programs, and enrollment at schools, facility conditions, transportation concerns, program performance. So there is and will be an ongoing review and assessment of the district's needs, and any documents that are produced as a result of an open study would obviously be subject to grandma. If as a result of an open study it is determined that a school may need to be closed, then a school closure study team will be formed. The policy allows the board to outsource that school closure study team, as has been done, or to go through that process internally and have the district make up that school closure study team. At the same time, the school that we're looking at for closing will develop a school community impact committee. And that school community impact committee will be responsible for gathering input from the community and providing that input back up to the school closure study team. And that will happen as part of the process. So the principal and there's a committee that is made up of the principal and other individuals, including parents and teachers, will be responsible for gathering input that they can then be relayed back up to the school closure study team. The study team would then evaluate current and projected enrollment, financial impact, cost savings. We have a list of criteria and factors that will go into a discussion of whether or not a school ought to be closed, and it will conclude with the report, a written recommendation in the form of a report that's presented to the board. In the event that a school closure is recommended, then the next step would be to look at boundary changes. And the policy would then create a school boundary study team as opposed to a school closure study team. But the school boundary study team would work with, again, a school team to gather community input and bring that back to the board for recommendations on how to align new boundary adjustments. The process is intended to be transparent, is intended to bring in community and parent, student, teacher feedback to the process, and also for the board to have time to review that information in real time and not just at one hearing at a board meeting. As we were looking at the policy, it is on first read, but Superintendent Butters and Board Member Larson brought up a point that in addition to our current policy, we have guidelines that we have included in our policy manual. And those guidelines outline a level 1, 2, and 3 boundary adjustment depending on the significant impact of the boundary adjustment. If it's a minor adjustment that's not going to impact kids, it's a level 1. And depending on the different levels, we would approach it differently. The policy committee did not include any of those levels from that guideline into this new policy. So we are going to need to adjust this policy to incorporate those levels from the guidelines that we didn't consider because it wasn't part of the policy. So I'd like to present the policy on a first read with the board's understanding and consent that the policy committee will go back and make some adjustments, and there will be some changes for the second reading in August.
Okay.
Well, one thing I was just going to point out to the rest of the board was during our MGT meeting on Monday, the head person, I don't know what her, Marcy, she pointed out that there was specifically there was a boundary between Bates and North Ogden Elementary that actually wasn't on a main road. It cut through homes instead of a main road. So in several instances you had a cul-de-sac where the houses on the corners went to North Ogden, but the rest of the cul-de-sac was in Bates. And she's like, these are really interesting boundaries. Like, is this something you want to clean up as we create these study areas? And we were talking, and Superintendent Butters was like, oh, well, we can do that on a level 1. And I was like, well, that's not actually in policy. So, there were a few other things like that where a line might cut in between homes because of new home development. Anyways, that kind of led to this discussion that we had guidelines, but we had policy, but we need to merge them into one. So I wanted to make that point. And then I also just wanted to say, for a lot of these changes that we've made in terms of like the school closure study teams and the impact committees, a lot of that change was due to concerns from the Lowman View community, because we all had a lot of learning experiences in that closure study, for good or for bad. So I just wanted to thank that school community group for being proactive and offering more suggestions on to how we can do this better.
Okay, thanks.
Just a question, the guidelines include the dates and timelines as required?
That is in the policy.
Policy, yeah.
Mhm, yes.
Good.
All right, Board, I need a motion to approve the revised policy 6250, school attendance areas, on a first reading. Motion, please. Jan, and will be adjusted in the future, yes. Wiley was a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Heidi, thank you, and thanks to the committee for all your work that you've done on those. Moving along, Board, at this time it's time to reappoint Superintendent Butters. Superintendent has served two-year terms. She's completing her second term at the end of this month. She was first appointed in August of 22. This reappointment would be for a 2-year term as well. Any discussion on that? Go ahead, Jan.
Been very intentional leadership from Superintendent Butters. The implementation of the implementation of a robust strategic plan, the mindful attention to a complicated budget that we just heard tonight, and how that supports students specifically, and the inclusion of all stakeholders with transparency. I don't know anybody that has responded more to our stakeholders. Thank you for your vision and dedication.
I would very much like to reiterate what Board Member Burrell has said. I have worked with a lot of educators, and I don't think I have ever found someone who is so responsive, so caring about individuals at every level. I so appreciate what she has done for our district and continues to do for the community and for the students and for the teachers, and it's just an absolute honor to be able to serve with her. Thank you so much.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would just add that we're grateful for the leadership capabilities and what you show in leadership, and willing to take a hard hit when it's necessary. Sometimes unwarranted, but sometimes necessary. But grateful for the leadership, and I've always said that a real leader is one that can stand alone in a crowd. So we appreciate what you do.
Anything?
Can I just add a comment? First of all, I want to say that Superintendent Butters is a great asset, has been, and continues to be. We're in some difficult times right now. But through all this, I've been at peace with who we have at the helm of the leadership in our district. But the thing that I appreciate most about what she does is it's all about kids first. Everything that she does and is motivated by is to do its best for the students in our district. That's why people want to work here, and that's why we have such a great school district. Thank you, Gina.
I just want to echo what's already been said. I've only had the opportunity to work with Superintendent Butters in my time on the board, and there's nobody more hardworking than her. One of the recommendations, letter of recommendations, assessments. But one of the comments was we need to take her phone away from her because she's known to be texting and emailing at 12 a.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m. So she's one of the hardest working people out there, and I look forward to working with you for at least 2 more years. Thanks, Gina.
Any other? Doug?
Just second what everybody else says, and I'd just say to those that might be critical, use the old proverb, before you criticize somebody, walk a mile in their shoes or moccasins, whatever it is, and they would realize what a great job she's done. Continues to do. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I think you gotta approve me first.
But why?
Well, I appreciate.
Did I miss something? I
appreciate
did.
the kind comments. Thank you so much.
It's a good thing you're where you're at. Board, I need a motion to reappoint Superintendent Butters and approve her contract. Janice and Jan, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. Now let's do this, should we?
Just smug.
That I will discharge
That I will discharge
the duties of my office
the duties of my office with fidelity. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Board, we have a need to convene in a closed session. This is a strategy to discuss the pending or reasonable imminent litigation, discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. Mr. Mitchell, will you please conduct a roll call so we can move into closed session?
Yes, moving into a closed session requires a roll call vote. Please respond with a yes or no after I call your name. Board Member Williams.
Yes.
Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Burrell.
Yes.
Board Member Jardine.
Yes.
Board Member Christensen.
Yes.
Vice President Hurst.
Yes.
And Board President Whittison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to our board meeting tonight. We appreciate your attendance. And stop on the way home and get some ice cream to wake you up after that one.